name is Diana Sun. I'm 58 years old. I was born in Philadelphia, but my parents moved to Dover, Delaware when I was still very young. So I don't really have many memories of Philadelphia, and my childhood memories all take place in Dover. I decided when I was a little girl that I was going to be a writer, and I wrote fiction and all that stuff, until I discovered the theater, at the age of 18. And so I remember in the fourth grade, my teacher, Mrs. Russell, we had to write these essays about what we were thankful for. And I said I was thankful for my family, including my big brother, who sometimes helped me with my homework or helped me learn to ride a bike. So we turned in our essays and then we went out to recess. So when we came back, Mrs. Russell said, all right, while you guys were out there playing, I read all of your essays and I just want to say that I am disappointed in all of you. I asked you to write about what you were thankful for, and all of you wrote about being thankful for your TV or for your bike or for your games, and only one of you wrote about something that was meaningful. And that person is Diana Sun, and I'm going to hang her essay up for all of you to read. And that was it. That is all it took. And I say, you cannot underestimate the power of teachers, because to recognize me, it was just literally the first moment that I got recognized for something I did. And it is not hyperbolic to say that at that moment, I decided I was going to be a writer, and I never changed my mind. I was a latchkey kid, right? My parents, they opened their own store when I was 9. My mom had been stay-at-home, until then. And my dad worked at other people's pharmacies. But at 9, they bought this drugstore in Milford, Delaware. And my mom went back to work. So I'd come home, I'd watch TV. And at that time, we would have these, there were these, I guess, talk shows. And they would have actors or performer entertainers, on as guests as well. I guess I really kind of became enamored of people who could open up their mouths and sing, or, show clips of movies and TV shows. So I consumed story, and I really lived in those worlds. In my imagination, I lived in the world of The Love Boat, I lived in the world of Fantasy Island. I continued to write and read. And I was always acknowledged by my English teacher as being a good writer. And I wrote for the middle school newspaper. I really dug into it. Senior year in high school, we had this Jewish teacher from Queens, Mrs. Levitt. She was an intellectual. She and her husband, her husband wrote op-eds for the newspaper. They were politically active. They were basically New York intellectuals in Dover, Delaware. And we spent, I think it must have been fall semester of senior year in high school reading Hamlet. And I really identified with Hamlet. I loved the story. I just felt that basically, Hamlet's this teenage boy who is called to do something that is beyond his ability. So Mrs. Levitt bought tickets for us to see this production of Hamlet at the public theater, and it was going to be a whole field trip. We would go up for the day. So about a week before the field trip, Mrs. Levitt comes into class and she says, all right, I've read the reviews of Hamlet, and I found something out that I didn't know about before when I bought the tickets, and it's too late to return them, so we're just going to go. And so we're all grumbling, oh, what is it? What is it? Right? And she goes, well, apparently Hamlet's being played by a woman. First of all, I don't have any history of going to the theater, period. Right? We don't have anything like that in Delaware, and you'd have to go to Philadelphia. But my parents just did not have a history of theater going. So I was just play's gonna suck. But here I'm in New York City. There are all these used record stores where you could buy imports, hard to find, 45s and LPs. So I, bought some records and all that stuff. And I was like, this is gonna make the trip worthwhile. But, we all had to meet back up at the public theater, to see the show. And I remember walking into the public theater, and to me, might as well have been the Metropolitan Opera House. It was so grand to me. It was so fancy. I remember thinking like, I feel like I just fell off a turnip truck. We went to see the show, and the Public Theater has a number of theaters in it. This was in the Ansbacher, which is round, right? And it has these big columns, kind of obscuring the stage, to be frank. And then one of the early scenes come out as a court scene, right? So king and queen and like, a whole bunch of characters. And so this like young dude, all dressed in black, short, dark hair, like comes in and he sits against the column and he's just reeking of attitude and charisma. So, I'm just like, I don't know who this guy is in the play, but he's interesting to watch. So I'm just gonna follow him. And then he speaks Hamlet's first lines, right? And so I literally reach under my seat and I pull the playbill out and I go, oh, they must have realized their mistake and recast a man, right? The reviews came out. People were like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Casting a woman as Hamlet. This is what's going on in my mind. And then I open the page and it says Diane Venora playing Hamlet, right? So I'm like, that's her? So that was like blowing my mind. The play opened up to me in a way beyond, I was already relating to it. And then I was just like, that's it. He's a teenager, like right in front of me. And I was also just really kind of blown away by like the fact that they were acting in front of me, right? Because like as somebody who watched a lot of TV and movies, to see actors in person really blew my mind. Like, wow, they can enter this other state of mind and they're creating a world in front of me. By the time the play ended, I was kind of like, oh my God, like now the spell is broken, right? We're all clapping. And I was like, I got to get back here, And so like all my friends, like, we're just getting back onto our bus and going to drive back to Delaware, just about a 3-hour drive. Public Theater's in Greenwich Village, right? As we're pulling out, I see these buildings with purple and white flags on them that say NYU. And that's actually where Mrs. Levitt, my teacher, had gone. So when I went back, I was like, I want to apply to NYU. And she was like, okay, I will write you a letter of recommendation. And I got in, and they gave me scholarship and all that stuff. And my parents had sort of like very passively given up on the idea of me being a doctor, at some point, because I really was like unyielding, about this like the whole time. And so I remember my mom saying like, okay, I guess you can be a writer. I just hope that you marry a rich man. So anyway, I ended up at NYU and I was like, but I really was very actively pursuing like the record business. But at the same time, I really was trying to see theater, and I took a class called Drama and Performance in New York. And we went to see all these plays. And so I got an internship at La Mama Experimental Theater Company in the East Village. And I ended up interning in the office during the day, working in the box office on the weekends, and doing running crew in the evenings. So I was at La Mama 7 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day, while I was a college student, And so the thing is, like, I really did cobble together my own theatrical education, because I was in the College of Arts and Science. I was taking classes in like Greek mythology and astronomy and like, and literature classes. The ethos of La Mama is if you work there and everybody chips in and works on everybody else's play, it still had that vibe of if you put in the work, then we'll put on your plays. So I did have my first professional production while I was a senior in college. And it's, not anything I'm especially proud of. Like, when people ask me what my first play was, I don't say that one. But it was an incredible experience. But I did, I graduated and like, my mom had her stroke when I was a freshman. And there was a big question, like that was a very difficult time for me. Obviously, she was the hands-on parent. She was, very much somebody I did want to please. I mean, I felt close to her. I wanted to please her. So when she had her stroke, and it was like really massive stroke, and they said like, well, if she survives at all, she's going to be like severely disabled, and she was. And I really questioned, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, because this was my first semester of freshman year, and it happened while we were home for winter break, right? It's a few days after Christmas. So it was just like, that my life changed. And obviously hers did too. And the whole family's did. I really questioned, like, am I supposed to go back to college? You know, because she was in the hospital for a week. She was in rehab for months. And I was just like, you know, I just didn't know. Like, my mom almost died, you know, and now she's severely disabled. What am I supposed to do? Like, am I supposed to quit college and take care of her? And I did go back, but I like reduced my schedule so that I was basically at school 3 days and then with my mom 4 days. I would take the train from New York to Wilmington, where her rehab facility was. And I have an aunt there, my dad's sister lived there, so I could stay with her and spend basically the weekend, you know, or 4 days, you know, with my mom in the rehab center. I felt like I was just trying for somebody to tell me that it was okay to live my life. The cultural element, you know, this idea that for me, that was like my mom gave up everything to come here. She gave up her culture, her language, her family. Like, we never really saw her family. Like, her family never came here. What I felt was a specifically Korean American dilemma, which is feeling like, oh, do I get to live my life? Do I deserve to live my life when my mom needs help? You know, sometimes I feel like being Korean American, like, you are two things, right? And in some way, they seem kind of irreconcilable, right? Like, Korean is so much like about family and more of a collective, right? Community-minded thinking. The American culture is about, you know, like individuality, you know, and making your dreams come true. And I think a lot of the stories that I've told here today, it's really about like trying to marry those two things and feeling the conflict of which one wins, you know, like I am both, you know, I'm exposed to both influences. I embody, you know, aspects of both cultures. Like, in this situation, which one is supposed to win? And growing more into myself, you know, is like also about making a choice and committing to it. I also do strongly believe, even at my advanced age, that we are still evolving, you know, like that we're still figuring ourselves out, figuring other people out, figuring out our way through the world, and what our commitment, you know, is to. That's the beauty of being an artist, you know, and of being a writer or whatever, is that you are committed to, I mean, you know, what you care about and what your experiences are and how they give you your lens through life. Like, you're constantly going, what is it now? What am I seeing now? You know, and what stories do I want to tell now? I think it should always be evolving and changing. A lot of people, for getting old, it's like, as you get old, it's like, all right, I'm, you know, like, I can give up on some things now. And I think in some ways that is true. Like, there are some things that like, I'm like relaxed, like I'm, you know, more relaxed about. There's so much more that I want to do with my work and my career. Like, I'm still hungry. My name is Diana Sun, and this is my Korean American story.